Hello, everyone. Welcome to Interesting Stories. Let's begin. After his father's funeral, Elliot Grant didn't return to Seattle right away. He sat in an old pickup truck borrowed from his uncle, parked along a red dirt road leading into a forested plot of land in Lynn County, Oregon. In front of him stood a weathered wooden cabin, its roof mossy green, with crooked steps leading up to a porch, once the home of his grandparents. The house had been abandoned for over 20 years. No one had lived there. No one had even mentioned it. And now, with a notarized deed tucked inside his father's estate folder, Elliot had just learned the land was now his. The late afternoon breeze carried the scent of damp pine and decaying grass. Elliot opened the truck door, stepped out, and looked up at the house, trying to recall when he had last seen it. "You used to need a stool just to reach the kitchen counter," his mother once told him. The front door was still locked, but the rusted hinges let out a long, aching groan as it gave way with a gentle push. Inside, it was dim and musty. Beams of sunlight leaked through the wooden slats, illuminating layers of floating dust that drifted like ghostly ribbons. Elliot tapped the edge of an old window, still draped with a faded floral curtain. "Hello? Anyone still here?" he whispered, as if greeting a memory. Of course no one answered, but something remained. Not quite a ghost, not exactly emptiness, just something unfinished. The floor creaked beneath his first step. Elliot wandered through the living room, a worn-out armchair, a crooked family portrait on the wall. In the kitchen, a row of empty glass jars still lined the shelf, as though someone had once planned to use them again next summer. "This house, it's still alive," he murmured. But what unsettled him most wasn't the dust or cobwebs or the stale stillness of the place. It was the feeling of being watched, as if something lay beneath the floorboards. As he passed the bottom of the staircase, a slant of sunlight from the back door caught on a chipped brick. Elliot froze. Something was wedged beneath the third step. Not a mouse, not trash. A thick black cable as wide as his finger, snaking into the wall before vanishing under the floor. He crouched down and touched it. Cold, aged, but was there still current? "Weird. This place isn't supposed to have underground wiring," he muttered. And then his eyes caught a shallow dip in the corner of the floor where the dust was oddly disturbed. A strange instinct crept in, not fear, just the sense that this was bigger than just an old house left behind. Elliot frowned slightly, running his fingers along the cable. It was old, dusty, but not brittle. One end disappeared into the wall while the other vanished beneath a rotting stair-step. He sat down, pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and used the edge of his boot to gently brush away the thick layer of dust on the wooden floor. There was something underneath, a square metal hatch, its edges slightly curled up as if it had once been pried open and replaced. "This isn't how people wire electricity," he muttered, feeling a strange unease building inside him. Elliot went back to the truck, rummaged through the toolbox, and returned with a small crowbar. He tapped lightly on the hatch. Hollow, deep, click. The hatch popped open more easily than he expected. Below was a square pit, pitch black like the bottom of a well. A small steel ladder was already in place, descending into the ground. He paused for a moment, then smirked to himself. "Well, if someone's living down there, I hope they like coffee." His first step onto the ladder felt surreal. A sudden chill rose up and kissed his face. The smell of rust, mildew, and something faintly like old ozone made Elliot stop in his tracks. He pointed the flashlight downward. A narrow room began to reveal itself. Low-ceilinged concrete walls tinged in greenish-gray, wires running along them like dried roots. At the far end was a gray steel door, swallowed by darkness, no handle, just a corroded combination lock. Elliot touched the door. It was ice cold. Then, just as he turned to look for tools, something caught his eye near a stack of old wooden crates. A faint scratch, the shape of a handprint, on a faded old paint can. He pushed the can aside. Behind it, was another, smaller door, like a utility access panel with a built-in vent. No way! He gave it a gentle push. The door creaked open with a long metallic screech, then swung fully inward, revealing a short hallway and another staircase plunging even deeper underground. Elliot stood frozen. The air felt thick, unmoving. "Grandpa, what the hell were you building down here?" The steel staircase wobbled slightly under Elliot's steps. Each descent felt like peeling away from the surface, from the sky, from reality itself. The underground air was damp and heavy. Each breath seemed to filter through a layer of time, carrying the metallic scent of age, sweat, and secrets that should have stayed buried. At the bottom was another door, not locked, just closed. Elliot pushed it open. The room appeared, not large but sealed, dense. Two bare bulbs dangled from the concrete ceiling, one flickering, the other completely dead. The faint light revealed strange shapes, dust-covered machines, radio transmitters, an old curved screen computer. Some LED indicators still blinked, as if they'd never been turned off in over 2 decades. Elliot stepped carefully into the center of the room, afraid he might awaken something just by moving too fast. "What is this?" he whispered. A long wooden table stood against the wall, wires, toggle switches, knobs, some film canisters, and at the center, a black steel lockbox, the kind used by the military. Beside it, a thick, yellowed envelope. On the front, neat, slanted handwriting. "For Elliot, read alone." Elliot froze for a moment. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. "Grandpa, you meant for me to find this?" he whispered, speaking to someone no longer there. Inside was a long, handwritten letter. The first line made Elliot set the paper back down. His heart pounded too hard to continue. "Elliot, if you're reading this, it means your grandmother and I are gone, and the family secret can no longer stay hidden." He sat down in the wooden chair, envelope still in hand, eyes scanning the room. On a low shelf were tied-up folders, black and white photos taken from afar, and an old world map speckled with red dots across major cities. This room wasn't for surviving storms. It wasn't for food storage. It was a command center, a base, a workspace, and his grandparents, quiet, reclusive folks from rural Oregon, had not been ordinary people. Elliot took a deep breath and opened the letter again. "We were part of an organization that doesn't exist on paper. Your grandmother and I were embedded, observers and messengers, during the most dangerous years of the Cold War." The handwriting was soft, written with both gratitude and guilt. In the stillness of the underground chamber, Elliot sat motionless. Only the soft tick of blinking lights and the scent of old paper filled the air. Elliot set the letter down on the wooden table. His hands trembled, not out of fear, but from reading words written in quiet love and the shadows of a life never told. He inhaled deeply, then continued reading. "My dear grandson, if this letter has reached you, it means your grandmother and I never had the chance to explain everything in person. There are things we intended to take to our graves, but with age, I've learned, some secrets, if not told in time, become burdens others have to carry." His grandfather, Franklin Meyer, wrote that he and Elliot's grandmother, Sophia, were not the farmers people believed them to be. They had been trained in East Berlin in the early 1960s as part of a Soviet deep cover program. They were sent to America with new identities and long-term objectives: infiltration, data gathering, surveillance of high-level figures in the defense industry. Elliot shook his head, not in disbelief, just in awe. "My grandparents were spies," he whispered, eyes locked on the page. "We never did harm, Elliot. I never pulled a trigger. Our job was to listen, not to kill. But yes, we retained things we shouldn't have. We sent back information that wasn't ours to give, and that I cannot deny." After 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, contact with their handlers ended. Their official mission was over. But by then, we had grown too attached to this place. We loved the cabin, the garden, even the life we had once called cover. Most of all, we loved our son, your father, so we decided to stop. No more reports, no more contact. We chose to live as regular people. One part of the letter made Elliot choke up. You know, I spent 15 years gardening and never once planted a straight row of vegetables. And your grandmother never quite learned how to make proper apple pie. But when we saw your father smile, we knew we had made the right choice. Elliot brushed his fingers across the ink, faded at the corners. Maybe from age, maybe from tears, but nothing could erase the sorrow between the lines. At the end of the letter, his grandfather wrote about the bunker. This room, Elliot, is part of your family's history, whether you choose to accept it or not. I don't want you to live in darkness, but I also don't want this to be dragged into the light just to be swallowed by scandal. Do the right thing, but do it with your own heart. Elliot closed the letter. He didn't cry, but inside, something opened and something filled. Behind him, the machines continued blinking silently, as if nodding in agreement with a past that never truly disappeared. I hear you, Grandpa, Elliot said softly. Now I understand why this place was never for sale. Elliot sat in silence for a long time in the underground bunker, hearing only his own breathing and the faint crackle of static from a radio device still operating in a corner. He stood, ran his hand over the wooden table, and finally reached for the black steel lockbox he hadn't yet opened. The latch was rusted, but the lid wasn't sealed tight. A little force, and it gave way. What was inside? Not money, not weapons, but small, cold, silent things. A stack of neatly folded documents, passports and IDs, each with a different name, each with a different photo of Franklin, some clean-shaven, some with glasses, some in uniform, a velvet pouch holding tiny devices, wiretaps, antennas no thicker than hair, a printed telegram in Russian stamped in red, Strogo Sekretno, top secret. Elliot couldn't read Russian, but he didn't need to. These were meant for someone far away, and now the last person who understood them was gone. In the corner of the room was an old wooden chest, the kind people used for storing blankets in winter. Elliot pulled it open. The hinges squeaked. Inside, several undeveloped film rolls carefully wrapped in cloth, a set of world maps marked with cryptic notations, numbers, dates, region codes, small code cards like playing cards with faded edges, blue ink symbols on one side, erased smudges on the other. He picked one up and whispered, "This was used to decode or to transmit." No one's left to answer. An old IBM-style computer sat dormant by the bookshelf. Elliot pressed the power button. The screen flickered, then blinked, just black with lines of code. It didn't load the system. Like everything in here, he murmured, it once lived, but now it only waits. He pulled out a chair and sat in the center of the room. The dim light above cast his shadow long across the concrete floor. On the table, the letter. In his hand, a forged ID. Beneath his feet, decades that no one ever spoke of. My whole life, Elliot whispered, "Son, I thought Grandpa was just a quiet man who liked gardening and dominoes. But turns out, he lived a life I'd never be brave enough to imagine." He let out a long, heavy breath, not from pain, but because he had just stepped into a current so vast it had begun flowing long before he was born. In his shirt pocket, he still held the letter. He didn't know if he'd ever show it to anyone, or if he even should. But he knew one thing for sure: this secret wasn't meant to be forgotten. It was meant to be understood. Thank you for listening.